Hello, welcome back. This is King Rex. I'm doing a video on first seat responsibilities when playing Euchre. This video will just go over the responsibilities that you have if you're sitting in the seat to the left of the dealer, which means you're the first person to act. First I'm going to go over is calling next. Calling next is calling the same color as the turned down suit. For all the examples today, I'm going to assume that the turned up card on the top of the kitty is a heart. This works best against aggressive players. If you're playing against conservative players, you might not want to try calling next. It also works best if a jack or ace is the card that's turned down, because people have a propensity to pick up those higher um, cards off of the top of the kitty. They don't want to turn those ones down. Like I said, you do have to be careful against conservative players, and it is risky. Um, The idea is that your opponents will be weak in both red suits if they turn down a red card. So basically, if the jack of hearts or ace of hearts is on the top of the kitty, your opponents would most likely make hearts trump if they had the other jack or if they had other red cards in their hand, usually hearts. And the idea is that the heart cards kind of go together a lot. You're also hoping your partner will be strong in next. So if the jack of hearts is turned down, and you don't have the jack of diamonds, your hope is that the jack of diamonds is in your partner's hand. And you can't call it on thinner hands than normal because most people want to try to pick up what's on the top of the kitty and play it. The first thing they say is if you can call it on 3 trump. I chose 3 very low trump. To me, this really isn't a next call because you would probably want to call any 3 trump anyway. Even a hand like this where you have the 3 lowest trump and 2 weak offsuit cards and you're 3 suited. If hearts is turned down, diamonds doesn't. In a hand like this, regardless if diamonds is not trump, you're not likely to take a single trick. If you don't take a single trick, it means you will almost certainly not euchre your opponent, and it will be very hard for your partner to make their point because they won't be able to depend on you to get a trick. Even if, say, spades or clubs were called trump, since you're 3 suited here, the only thing you can really trump in on is a heart. And like I said, that's the only way you could possibly take a trick in this situation. And you'd be trumping low, so you could even get over trumped at that point. 2 trump and 1 ace. Once again, I want sort of low ones, the queen and 10, and I give what they call a green ace, which is the opposite color of what's trump, which is the ace of spades. This one's a bit riskier than the last one. I mean, unless you have 2 pretty decent trump, the idea is that you're hoping that your ace will make it, that you can get at least 1 trick out of your partner, and you want to hopefully be able to grab a trick with one of those 2 diamonds. Once again, I would not call this against conservative players that don't call. People are very aggressive at calling trump. This is when you might want to call this. They say 1 trump and 2 aces. This one's even tougher to call because if you leave that queen of diamonds out to draw a trump, you're hoping that it comes back to your aces and then you can win with those aces. That's the basic idea here. And no trump 3 aces. Some people won't even let you call a hand like this because they say you have to have one to call it, which is a made-up rule that doesn't really exist in the game. But what happens is that someone will deal out the cards. They'll put a jack up on the kitty, say the jack of spades. The only thing they have in their hands is a jack of clubs, and the person sitting in the first seat's mad because they had a good hand in red. And if the person that picked up the second jack had to turn it down, they would have scored a point. So they don't like the idea of being able to pick that jack up. But I don't know why there would be a rule that you can't call a weak hand. That makes no sense. You'd only be hurting yourself in most cases. This would be, and there's also some people that play what's called no trump, where you can just call that there's no trump, and this would be a great hand in no trump because you would pull 3 tricks right off the top of the bat with the aces, and then you could throw that queen of diamond, queen of clubs in hopes it makes it through. The next thing that the first thing has to worry about is what's called blocking or donating. There are some people that do it at other times, but you really should only do this when the score is either 9-6 or 9-7. You do this because it prevents your opponent from winning with a loner. If you're winning 9-6 and your opponent deals and they pick up what's on the top of the kitty and they call it a loan and they get it through, the game is over. That's why the first seat has to do it, because you don't even want to give the person in the second seat a chance to do it. So it's only done by the first seat, never blocked from any other seat, never block when you're the dealer. And you don't block if you have a stopper. The stopper in the case would be, we're saying if hearts would be called trump. So if you have the jack of hearts and hearts is on the top of the kitty, they can't score more than 1 point if they call it, so you wouldn't give them 2 points by calling it for them. So the right by itself, protected left, or the protected ace. The protected king would be the king plus 3 others, but if you have 4 trump, you should be calling it every time no matter what, even if you are ordering the jack, the right bower into your opponent's hand, even if you have the bottom 4 trump. Leading when your partner calls. This is another important one, and this is if your partner calls out of the third seat. The first thing you should always do if your partner calls out of the third seat is always lead trump. So if he calls hearts, lead hearts. If you have 2 hearts, and one of them is a jack, always lead that jack out. Even if the other one's a really low one, you lead the jack out, you're showing them where it's at. Your partner probably has the other jack, so they can throw their low card on it. In this case, you want to lead the ace. If the ace makes it, then you'd lead your offsuit ace. So if you don't have any trump, your partner will assume that you don't have. If you don't lead trump, your partner can basically assume that you don't have any. If you're playing high-level euchre with high-level partners, if you don't lead a trump up, they'll figure you don't have any, and they'll play their hand accordingly. So if you don't have trump, lead an offsuit ace. Better to lead a green ace if you have it, but if you don't, lead the next ace. Also pay attention to the other cards in your hand, because if you have, say if you had the same exact hander, but instead of having the queen of clubs, you had the ace of spades, the ace of diamonds would be more likely to make it than the ace of spades because you have 2 cards of that same suit. So lead an offsuit ace. If you do not have an offsuit ace, you can try to promote a king. What you're doing by promoting a king is if you lead the 10 of spades, you're hoping that the ace of spades will fall, and then the king will be the strongest card in that suit. And if spades are let again, you'd have the boss card in that suit. If no king, you just try to promote something else. On this hand, you do either the queen of spades or the queen of clubs. It doesn't even matter because you have the same thing both ways. Another thing to do too is if you're trying to promote, let's say you had 2 kings, which I guess I could have put it up there. Say if you had the king of spades and the queen of spades and the king of spades, the king of clubs and the 10 of clubs, you would lead the king that's got the queen behind him because only the ace of spades can take it other than trump. Leading against the loner. This is another thing that the first seed always has to do. You have to decide what to do in the first lead against the loner if the opponent calls it. Never lead a trump against a lone call if you don't call it. Say this is what, and I see people do this one all the time. A person calls it alone, they have the right bower, so they immediately lead the right bower to stop the loner. That right bower is always going to take a trick, and sometimes people will call a desperation loner where you may be able to euchre them if you play it right. So leading that right bower, if you lead something that your partner can trump and they can't, and you get one at the right bower, you'd only need a third, but leading the right bower out right off the bat is going to pull any trump your partner has, and your opponent can just throw their lowest trump on there. So you're actually helping them by leading the right bower out. So never lead trump into a loner. If you have an ace, if you have one ace that's an offsuit ace, do not lead it. The reason for this is there is an opportunity that your partner might have the other 2 offsuit aces. If you lead the ace of diamonds and your partner has the ace of spades and ace of clubs in their hands, and your opponent takes that ace of diamonds because they don't have diamonds, it could come down to on the 4th trick, where your partner's having to decide which ace to throw away, and they might throw away the wrong ace. If you have 2 aces, though, you do want to lead one, and some people will yell before they know what your other cards are. So if you had 2 offsuit aces, you'd want to lead one so you don't have to be the one making the decision on the 4th trick. If no aces, the best thing you can do is try to promote a king. Basically, you lead the 10 of spades here, hoping that if your opponent had the ace of spades, they would have to play it. This would be better if it was a queen-king combo. Ordering from the third seat. If the person ordered from the third seat ordered trump up, you should lead next. So basically, let's say pass, pass. The person in the third seat orders a trump card up into your partner's hand. Your partner should try to avoid themselves in next. And so you always want to lead next in that situation unless you have something going on with the aces. Always lead the aces first, though. Like if you have two aces, let's say this was the queen of diamonds, the ace of spades, and the ace of clubs. You'd probably want to lead one of your aces in that situation. Passing dirty, this is basically just a situation where, let's say a heart's up on the top of the kitty. You're good either, if you're in the first seat, you're good either way. You should really think of passing. So that's one thing you should always think of in the first seat is, will my hand still be strong if I call next or something else if I pass on the first seat? Because you might be able to euchre. If hearts was turned up, you probably euchre your opponent with this hand right here. You'll pick it up. You'll try to walk your ace of spades through. If it doesn't make it, you might even throw your 10 of diamonds out there to start with. Maybe you hope your partner trumps it up and they have to really go on it to trump it. You probably would force your opponent into euchre if they had a heart turned up and they picked it up. I want to thank you for watching. Like, share, subscribe, comment, and have a great day.